Let's have a bill hearing, everybody. There we go. Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Land Use and Transportation Committee. I'm Ryan Dorsey. I'm the chair of the committee, representative of the 3rd City Council District. We are here today for hearing on Council Bill 25-0095, title Commercial Motor Vehicle Repair on City Streets, Prohibition, for the purpose of prohibiting the practice of commercial non-emergency motor vehicle repairs on city streets or footways, establishing certain penalties and defining certain terms. The bill is sponsored by Councilmember Mark Parker, who is a member of the committee. Before we begin, we have with us Councilwoman Felicia Porter. How are you this morning?
I am well.
Okay. I appreciate the use of the microphone. We also have our committee staff member, Mr. Tony Leva. How are you doing? I will get to Councilman Mark Parker, member of the committee, who's going to present the bill here in a minute. How are you doing? You good? Great. We also have representatives from various city agencies. We have Councilmember Paris Gray with us. Good morning. As I said, we have representatives from DHCD, DOT, BPD, Finance, the Mayor's Office, Parking Authority, Office of Equity, and the Law Department. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here for this hearing on Council Bill 25-0095. I will now turn it over to the sponsor of the bill to tell us about this bill and why we should support it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. So this bill is intended to prohibit the dangerous and improper activity of commercial auto repair services on city streets and sidewalks. I'd like to particularly thank Greektown Neighborhood Association and the Brewers Hill Neighborhood Association for their partnership in bringing the issue to light and supporting this bill, as well as Department of Transportation and the Baltimore Police Department for working alongside our office throughout the process. I'd also like to thank my colleagues for their support and co-sponsorship. So the issue came to light in with our office after receiving a bunch of concerns across the district about disruptive and potentially dangerous commercial auto repair practices happening in city streets. In working with DOT and BPD, we discovered that these unlicensed, unpermitted auto repair services are not only specific to our district, but are of a citywide concern. And they've continued to expand kind of their footprint, popping up in public roadways and footways around the city. The improper use of city streets for vehicle repairs has resulted in transit, parking, and traffic disruptions. Residents have further noted concern over the presence of physical and environmental hazards, such as oil slicks and other hazardous materials left in the right of way. We had a challenge around enforcement. I think I've certainly heard this plenty of times. I know my colleagues have. We don't rush to legislation when other problem-solving methods can be used. And working closely with DOT, BPD, and the neighborhood, we explored pretty much all of those options, and essentially came back to this hole in the code that didn't allow, from the perspective of DOT and BPD, actual enforcement against these practices in particular. And so both organizations, but especially DOT, expressed an interest in helping to address this gap so that the behavior itself, the improper and dangerous behavior, could be addressed. So the bill seeks to fill that gap in the code by defining motor vehicle repair services and prohibiting activities performed by these repair services in public streets and footways, with the exception of emergency repairs. The bill also creates a system of penalties and fines specifically for offenses by commercial entities to better curb these practices. The bill does not prevent individual community members from working on their own vehicles outside their homes, nor does it prohibit emergency service providers, AAA or whatever roadside assistance might be working on cars that need work on the side of the roadway in order to return to a safe situation. With the safety and well-being of the community as a top priority, this bill outlaws an improper practice and a dangerous practice in our city streets and protects the public right-of-way for use by our vehicles of different kinds, buses, pedestrians, cars, and all the rest. I'd like to again stress for folks who are concerned, this bill does not prevent or address individuals working on their own vehicles or from receiving emergency services. It also doesn't weigh in on repairs that may take place on private property, that is in the public right-of-way. That's not in the purview of this bill. So thank you again to my colleagues, the committee chair. I really appreciate the time and attention and the support here. I will say there is one amendment that was offered in conversation with DOT. DOT, in reviewing the bill, came back and thought that wanted to increase the penalties on these activities where they face difficulty in enforcement, as the current penalties wouldn't be strong enough to effectively curb the practices of the commercial operators. And so we believe these increases reflect an appropriate update to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Parker. Do we have any questions or comments first from committee members? I have kind of a couple. I guess my main question is, like, how do we distinguish between somebody who is doing this as a business enterprise versus not?
No, absolutely. It's a really interesting
Or
question.
rather, how does a person in the field who is attempting to take enforcement action determine between the two? I
Yep.
didn't see any money change hands, so I can't prove that this person is doing this work for hire. How do I make sure that they fit the bill here?
Right, and so that's the challenge from an enforcement standpoint, right? In the case of what we've seen, so there's two specific ways that things this is trying to address. One is, in this case, somebody who was set up multiple days a week for long stretches of time in the same location, and even had posted signage, and was, and I think in this case, but if not other cases, was advertising on social media their services and kind of a come and pay me. And so was engaging, was communicating their commercial intent and their desire to receive funds for the work being done. So that would be part of an investigation. In this case, I mean, the person literally put up a sign, right? And you're like, okay, well, that's a clear indication it's a commercial activity as opposed to something else. The other circumstances where this has come into play is where there is a licensed, regulated, well-established auto repair shop that has decided to expand operations onto street sidewalks, parking lanes around it. And so that's clearly, again, tied directly to the activities, the fully legal and activities we want to support that are there, but they have decided to expand operations and have bays 4, 5, or 6 on Fleet Street, for example, or on Grundy Street. And so again, that's easy to tie back in. Outside of that, it may not be possible, and so then that's a conversation to be like, hey, listen, like, just so you know, it would be, if this was happening, it would be improper, illegal for this activity to take place. And so it provides an opportunity then for the enforcement arm, whether that's DOT or BPD, to have a conversation, clarify the rules, and hopefully then address the behavior, right? Because the goal isn't necessarily to issue a citation. The goal is to stop the practice so that it is, not causing the problem that it's causing. And so I think there's still even options, even when you can't prove that this exactly what's taking place. This gives enough of a background to be able to have a productive conversation to address the behavior.
We don't have planning here, but I'm pretty sure there's already a zoning provision that says that, like, an auto service place, a motor vehicle repair place must conduct all their work, I think not only on premise, but like indoors, right? And so obviously I think if they're doing that work out in the public right of way, that's a violation of the conditions of the zoning use permission for the property. But a lot of good that prohibition has done us over the years. It continues to happen. It also occurs to me that it's not just the businesses working in the street, but using streets as their as vehicle storage, as their parking lot. This is a much more passive, but I would say even more pervasive issue that we've also had essentially no success in enforcing. I guess, because, you know, it's hard to say, or it's hard to investigate, like, this vehicle that's in the street is deeded to this person who lives 15 miles away from here, who just happens to take their vehicle to this person to have it repaired. The vehicle owner didn't park their vehicle there, but it is their vehicle that is parked on the street, you know, with no tags on it, or, you know, in some sort of derelict condition. And, you know, we can all like reasonably deduce that the property owner, the business owner rather, is the one who parked it on the street in front of or around the corner from their place of business, and the neighbors are complaining like, this business does this all the time. There are 15 cars parked within a half a block of here that are just from this auto shop, but like, we've never been able to tie it back to the place of business, in my experience.
We've had, I mean, I think you named the challenge really well, and I think all of us have experienced it in our own districts. We've had some success with that, but again, it's been more along the lines of this car is obviously non-functional, right? So it's not that we were able to prove that it came from the auto repair shop, but it's next to the auto repair shop. It's in a state of disrepair on the street, which is its own violation.
Yeah.
It's been there longer than 48 hours. That's its own violation. Or it's not properly tagged and tagged and permitted, and they're like, okay, well, that's its own violation. So.
But then we cite the vehicle, and the citation goes to that person 15 miles away, and there's nothing brought against the actual business that put it there on the street and left it there on the street in this derelict condition. This person brought it to them to have it repaired, you know, in good faith. It's the business that kind of did the wrong here, but the person pays the price and the business carries on like nothing has happened, essentially. And I suppose you've had some conversations with DOT and BPD about how they would undertake to enforce this?
Yes, certainly. I mean, this came up in conversation where they were attempting to enforce and kept running into roadblocks.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a pretty clear understanding of how this would align with their efforts to respond to 311 calls or their proactive enforcement.
Okay, cool. Anything else from the committee? Okay, you got anything before I go to agency reports? Okay, great. Anything interesting that I should know about? Okay. All right, I'm just trying to open my mind here and just figure this whole thing out. Okay, great, thank you, Councilman. We'll go to some agency reports here. Okay, let me just pull this list up in front of me so I can just run down it. Let's go to the law department.
Hi, Councilman, members of the committee. Hillary Ruley on behalf of the Law Department. We approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency as well as the amendments.
Okay, great. Oh, do I have the amendments? Are they in the packet, Tony? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, great. Parking authority.
Good morning, Fran Bernzinski with the Baltimore City Parking Authority. We're favorable to this legislation. We think it will improve parking availability by reducing other non-compliant uses of the street and make legitimate on-street parking easier. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Great. Office of Equity and Civil Rights.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Zachary Wellman, Equity Passianos for the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. So the OECR discerns no inequity in the bill's intent to curb commercial street repairs, and we've also identified concurrent affirmative impacts, potentially on residents' health and safety, as well as promoting and incentivizing lawful stationary commercial vehicle repair. Mr. Chair, you touched a little bit on the zoning code. And in our report, it does reflect some of that as what you meant. There's a few different uses within the zoning code, namely motor vehicle service and repair major and minor. Minor is divided into two separate zoning uses, which is fully enclosed structure, and that is the only permitted repair use of a plot for repair, and then outdoor vehicle storage that does not encompass repairs, just storage. So when the OECR looked over this legislation, we kind of looked at the zoning code and considered, that the code is written very meticulously to promote behavior that is conducive to residents' health, to the best land use. I'm not, representative of planning, but I will speak to a little bit that these commercial, like mobile commercial vehicle repair services, are able to circumvent the zoning code in a way that, because they do not have to go through normal channels of, business licensing, permitting, and operating in a permanent structure within the code, it really allows them to engage in behaviors that have negative externalities on residents and on the city as a whole, and promoting civil risks, hazards, and environmental consequences in residential zoning districts, in commercial zoning districts that are not permitted for vehicle repair. And so what the OACR has identified is that, curbing these behaviors, at least through legal means, and then, through what enforcement is possible, will really promote better adherence to the zoning code, promote, equitable access to the public right-of-way and footways, and also just generally deter those negative externalities associated with mobile vehicle repair on public footways and rights-of-way. That concludes OACR's report, and we request a favorable report on the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate the deep dive of your report here. Thank you. DHCD.
Thank you, Chair Dorsey. Jason Wright, representing DHCD. We stand by our bill report deferring to the Department of Transportation. The bill, as it's currently written, would have no operational impact on DHCD. And while enforcement is not specified within the bill, the Department of Transportation is the responsible agency for enforcement in the right-of-way.
Okay, thank you. DOT.
Thank you, Councilman. Luciano Diaz reporting for DOT. First, thank you, Councilman Parker, for working with us on this and bringing this forward. We really appreciate just the opportunity to have another tool in our arsenal for dealing with this kind of business. We have historically relied on our TEOs to enforce parking violations, but we have had extremely limited success in kind of curbing this pervasive behavior. So we're hoping that by having the ability to issue these higher fines to businesses found violating the provision that no repairs can happen on city right-of-way, we can start to curb the behavior of cars being worked on city sidewalks, alleys, and just also being able to put additional resources into enforcing on vehicles that are being stored in alleys, sidewalks, and parked on the curb. We currently do have 10 special enforcement officers in DOT, so it may take a bit of time before we're able to kind of ramp up that enforcement activity, but we're hoping that beyond just generating additional revenue, we'll be able to start seeing that decrease in this behavior, as this will hopefully be less of a cost of doing business and more of a very tangible penalty for this illegal behavior. So we stand by our favorable bill report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you after we finish the other reports here. Department of Finance.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Apologies for any delay in getting the bill report to you. Pardon me. My name is Gabriel Stewart Sykowitz, and I'm with the Department of Finance. We support City Council Bill 250095. It aims to prohibit commercial non-emergency motor vehicle repairs on city streets and sidewalks. This consolidates enforcement authority with the Department of Transportation. And I have not reviewed, I hear that there are amendments for a higher enforcement. While I have not reviewed them in my report, I did note that the as written, the fines are equal to that of Montgomery County. And so that is in line with the other jurisdictions. Most of the other jurisdictions in Maryland don't have a fine specifically for this, including, and we also looked at DC. However, we think that DOT can manage enforcement for this fiscal year with current staffing, and any future staffing needs will need to be addressed through the budgeting process. While there will be some revenue from this, we also think, as my OECR colleague noted, there'll be unquantifiable impacts of peace of mind and health as well. So we support this bill, and just keep in mind that as written, the fines are in line with the rest of the state.
Can you say that as written?
Yeah. So
Lines are- the
when
fines
I analyzed the bill unamended, it is in line with the Montgomery County provision for fines in the right-of-way for vehicles that are being repaired. And so I just wanted to note that it was in line with.
A penalty of not less than $25 or more than 100. So between $25 and $100.
So for Montgomery County, fines start at $100 for the first offense and increase to $150 for subsequent offenses.
Okay. But not $25?
No.
Okay.
I believe that was, there's a provision in our bill that says all other violations are $25.
Yeah, here, page 4, line 29, says a person violating paragraph A1 or A2 of this subsection, of this section shall be subject to a penalty of not less than 5 or more than 25 for the first offense.
Mr. Chair, I can weigh in a little bit here.
Yeah, please.
So, so this is obviously an update to existing regulations. So they are on page 4 under penalties. Those are existing penalties for the current prohibitions that already exist. And so that's going up higher, 16.5A, 1 and 2. 1 and 2 are already unlawful. We are adding number 3. It shall be unlawful for a motor vehicle repair service to make a repair, replacement, or adjustment, blah, blah, blah. So the fines down below under penalties, the ones on page 4 apply to 1 and 2 and continue that same penalty level that currently exists. And then for penalties 2 on the top of page 5, the original bill was duplicating the same penalty level of 25, well, almost the same penalty level of not less than 25 or more than 100 for the first offense, not less than 100 or more than 200 for a subsequent offense. That's the section that DOT came back to us and encourage the higher numbers that are in the amendment.
Okay. Are there any, BPD. Sorry, you were not on our list, but we have a report from you. Thank you.
Not a problem. Happy to be here, sir. Kara Ashburn on behalf of Baltimore Police Department. We stand behind our favorable bill report, and this would allow our neighborhood community officers to coordinate with DOT. So when people come to us with problems of these vehicles blocking right-of-ways and sidewalks and things like that, that we have a mechanism that we can partner with DOT and solve those issues for our citizens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for agencies? All right, I want to come back to DOT and BPD and hear more about how this enforcement actually gets conducted. I mean, I can walk 10 minutes from here right now and be at multiple auto body shops where I can guarantee you that there are easily 5 to 10 vehicles sitting on the street right now without tags that DOT could go and ticket every single day just for being there, and that doesn't happen. And yesterday, I biked up Charles Street at 5 p.m. and there were easily $5,000 worth of fines to just be plucked from cars that were parked in just 4 blocks of a bus lane on Charles Street between Reed and Mount Royal, or Reed and Penn Station, 5 blocks. And that's like that every single day, and DOT doesn't go out there and just like, that's a layup, right? That could be done every single day and just be money in the bank, and we could, hopefully deter that behavior. but it doesn't happen. Like, no matter how much we talk about it needing to happen, it just doesn't happen. And so at the same time that, like, we already have that kind of enforcement not happening, and presumably it's the same staff that we would need to rely on to enforce this bill, and knowing that we've had numerous conversations about DOT agency concern for employee safety in situations where they could encounter potentially hostile vehicle or property owners, what do we expect is actually going to happen in terms of enforcement here? Luciano.
So first, in terms of enforcing on these auto repair shops, this would be done through our special enforcement officers, which are a different group of officers. Our TEOs, transportation enforcement officers, are just a mix of traffic and parking enforcement, and they have a very narrow set of duties, which, as we know, are actually so numerous throughout the city that we don't have enough staff for that proactive enforcement. That's something that, I mean, quite frankly, we all at DOT want to do more proactive enforcement. Along Charles Street, we want that bus lane to succeed, and we want to have the resources to be able to be out there every day and get this illegal parking behavior to stop happening. I'm hoping that will be a completely separate issue to this new enforcement of using our special enforcement officers to go out to these businesses and start ticketing them. Our logic is that with these higher fine amounts, we will be able to more easily justify having our very limited number of special enforcement officers visit the businesses, issue fines, and hopefully, it's not that it's a revenue generating operation first and foremost, but they will have to be taken away from, for example, street cut enforcement. So these officers will have to balance their time between street cuts and other right-of-way violations and these businesses. And maybe through the higher fine amounts, we'll be able to make a better case for additional special enforcement staff in the long term.
I'll just note that the fine for parking in a bus lane is $250, commensurate with what's proposed here, and or comparable to what's proposed here, and that hasn't yielded basically any bus lane enforcement. Who are these special enforcement officers? I mean, I've just literally never had them brought up in conversation as something that exists other than TEOs.
So the code has 3 different kinds of officers outside of police officers. Special enforcement officers are your code enforcement, essentially. They can enforce any section of the code that police officers can, except that they cannot make arrests. They do not enforce parking or traffic law, but they do enforce housing code, zoning code, that kind of violation. I believe that this would be a zoning or code violation, so that's why we expect our special enforcement officers to do all of that enforcement.
Okay. Yeah, because it's not a parking violation. It's not a TEO thing. Where are these special enforcement officers housed within the structure of DOT?
I believe all of our special enforcement officers work under the right-of-way division. They're split between, just right-of-way enforcement and specifically street cuts enforcement.
How does one request service? How does one make a service request via the 311 system?
I would have to double check, but right now, a special enforcement officer would be dispatched, for example, for a right-of-way violation. So if that's reported, one
That's
of them,
literally never happened anytime I've ever made a right-of-way violation report. I have not been able to get any response from the right-of-way division chief or anybody else in DOT about what it actually takes to get right-of-way enforcement to happen for an average person. I have made countless 311 reports for basic things, including after being told here by the right-of-way division chief that the street repairs or whatever it is, SR, was specifically the way to get right-of-way to come out and inspect a bad street cut, only to then put one in and later be told, when I followed up on having had nothing happen, that in fact, no, that is not the way to get right-of-way to do anything. And so I still have no answer as to how to get the right-of-way division to actually respond to any SR whatsoever. And so I'd like to get real clarity from the Department of Transportation on exactly how I can expect a special enforcement officer to come out in response to a service request and what service request that is.
Understood.
Okay, great, thank you. Does BPD anticipate doing any of the enforcement of this law?
I imagine that it would absolutely, we could, do the enforcement of this law. It would probably fall to our NCOs that go out on their day shift and do ticket vehicles for, the license plate. They go to their community meetings, hear from community members that this vehicle's been sitting abandoned for, X amount of time, and they can, take special attention to take care of that. So folding that into their responsibilities when they're going out and doing this proactive enforcement for the community would be how we most likely would be enforcing this. But also noting that any police officer can make, a ticket or a fine or that for unauthorized repairs and stuff.
So how does this work? I'm a guy out on the street conducting my auto repair business, and a DOT special enforcement officer comes up and says, what you're doing is illegal. I'm going to, give you a civil citation for this? Give me your driver's license so I know who you are so that I can issue you a civil citation. It's not like we're sending something to a house for a property maintenance violation at like by DHCD, where it's like obvious, like you're citing the owner of this property for conditions of this property. How does this work that I am gonna, Hillary?
Yeah, sure. So if we're talking about the use of let me get the name right, special enforcement officer, because we have three different kinds. Special enforcement, subtitle 71 of Article 19, then subtitle 72 and 73 have special parking and special traffic.
Okay.
So if you're doing a special enforcement officer, they would follow the citation process in the code. If you're doing a police officer, they would just basically be giving them a ticket, a citation that would be for this, however BPD normally cites people for not arrestable offenses, that kind of thing. Does that help at all?
I mean, forgive my ignorance here, but you said they would cite through the citation process that's in the code.
Got it. I've got
Like,
that right
what-
up.
Yeah, what does that mean?
So it's a citation with a prepayable fine that a special enforcement officer is authorized to issue. So they probably have just like this booklet, I am assuming. And then they basically, each citation's made, I'm just literally reading the law. Citation is made with sufficient copies, so a copy can be given to the person and a copy retained by the officer, and then they can challenge it in district court.
But you're the special enforcement officer and I'm Jimmy with a wrench. How do you issue that citation to Jimmy with a wrench when Jimmy with the wrench goes, I'm just Jimmy with a wrench. I'm not gonna tell you anything else about me.
Well, but that's like every citation and every fine. That's why there's due process. If you If you get a citation that's not for you, you don't think it belongs, then you go challenge it.
No, I mean, you don't know who I am. You
That
don't know
doesn't-
you don't know my last name. You can't issue me a citation if you don't know my last name. I can't be expected to actually.
Well, if
pay
I'm a
the-
police officer, I can ask for your ID.
Yeah, but can a special enforcement officer ask for my ID?
Yeah, I mean, however they this can't be the first time they've ever done this. I mean,
In my experience, probably is.
well, I
I've
mean,
been here for 9
essentially,
years and I never heard anything like this.
my answer would be however they normally do this for all the other things they're citing for. I mean, this wouldn't be the first, they would do whatever they normally do for these kinds of things.
What else falls into a similar kind of scenario, Luciano?
So I can't give you an answer off the top of my head. I haven't been involved in this process before.
Yeah.
But I can find out from our team what they do in this kind of situation.
Yeah.
I would imagine that when a special enforcement officer is issuing a citation for this, they want to redirect the citation from the employee to the business. Because they don't have the power to make arrests. You know, they can't penalize a person for refusing to comply. They can't force a person to produce their ID. They can't arrest a person for refusing to comply. And that's just what their powers are within the code. But I can find out what their process is when a person does refuse to comply with issuing a citation.
Yeah, because this is, I mean, this is just some guy on the street. This isn't necessarily a guy in front of a business. This is just some guy on the street. Hillary, and I'll come to you, Mark.
Sorry, I scrolled. In the city code, the person giving the citation has to have the person receiving it sign for it, and it's illegal to not give your identification. So if you don't give an identification to the person who's trying to cite you, that's another $500 fine, and then the process for compliance is all in the code, if that helps.
Okay, and so ostensibly a person who has a non-compliant person who won't sign for it, I still can't issue the citation for your non-compliance, except kind of.
It says,
Yeah.
let me read. It is unlawful for any person to whom a citation is issued to refuse to provide personal identification on request. Any person so refusing is subject to police arrest and on conviction, a fine not to exceed $500. So theoretically, the process works by if you don't tell me your name and you don't give me your ID and you don't sign for this particular violation, then I call for the cops who come and arrest you.
Okay.
That's
Councilman
what's
Parker.
written.
Yeah, that's what's written. Yeah, I understand that.
I'm not denied that there's real significant barriers to enforcement, especially in a more informal situation versus when it's spillover activity from an actual shop. Oftentimes there's a vehicle that has tools and sometimes even signage. We posted some that had handwritten signage identifying at least the name of the person in the operation and a phone number, as well as the vehicle, which is presumably registered to them or to a business. So there's that aspect of things. But yes, I mean, certainly, the more.
Jimmy with a wrench at 443, right?
Sure. I mean, sometimes there's that, but especially, I mean, very rarely is it a single person kind of out there. Usually there's a vehicle, a work vehicle associated with it that then can be another way to, track back to, right here, to track back to a responsible party.
Good.
Right.
Mr. Chanella from the mayor's office, how are you doing today?
Good, thank
How
you,
was your
Mr. Chair.
birthday?
Thank you.
It was good?
It was good. It was great. I just have a quick question, if I may. How is the citation that is given for repairing a vehicle in the right of way, is this similar to like a parking citation? Or does somebody actually need to sign it? Because like with our parking citations, they see the parking violation, they take their picture with their handheld, and they issue the ticket and just put it on your car.
Actually has to be signed for because you can't, the thing that enables you to issue a parking citation to a vehicle is I can see the license plate number, and if there's no license plate on it, I can read the VIN inside the windshield. I can tie this violation to that car, and the law is structured that that violation becomes the responsibility of the vehicle owner.
Got it.
That's different human beings don't walk around with a VIN on their neck.
Right. Which is why for me, and just knowing specifically how the chair and his level of operational accountability for DOT, and that if this bill were to pass, within 30 days, there would be expectation from this committee that DOT and BPD and whatever other agencies will be fully prepared to enforce. And what I didn't hear was a compelling argument that that's where we are right now. I think that there's a need for some more collaboration around, because obviously DOT would need to come up with some rules and regs around what that looks like. We've had the conversation around the special enforcement officers, which is also my first time hearing that as well. So I just want to make sure that what we pass is actually what can operationally be implemented for the agency, because again, the expectation will be in whatever land use and transportation hearing that comes up, which is, and hey, by the way, how is, the implementation of 25-0095 going, right? And I want to make sure that the agency is postured to be able to provide a substantive update on implementation. I think there's still some questions and like operationally some pieces that we need to hash out. I'm not saying that this bill doesn't need to move forward today, but I think that is important for the committee to consider. If we ultimately want this to be something that
I'm
is.
going to let the sponsor of the bill respond.
No, I appreciate that, Tyler. I think in as much as the genesis of this bill was really close collaboration with DOT, where they were attempting to do the enforcement that they wanted to do for an activity that they knew was not in the public interest, but then we identified collectively this gap in current legislation, that the desire and also the capacity for how to carry it out is kind of already present. What was missing was the legislation to then allow DOT to carry out what they wanted to do and knew was in the public interest. I don't want to speak for Luciana, but I feel like that's consistent with your reports and our conversations.
Right. We could begin to enforce this. Obviously, additional staff would be helpful, but again, because current fines are extremely low. Current fines essentially act as a deterrent on their own for us to enforce this. This would be essentially a bad use of an officer's time, at least from an agency revenue perspective. Having this additional revenue come in through every citation would make a strong case both internally and in terms of the number of staff we have available, that this additional enforcement would be beneficial and allow us to get additional staff ideally. I also wanted to add that our special enforcement officers are uniformed officers appointed by the police commissioner. So while they are not able to make arrests, they are law officers.
They've got gusto. Okay, I'm just real quick. I'm going to take 1 minute here just for my own clarity. I want to kind of copy these numbers from the amendment into the bill text so that I can see it all in line, if that's okay. I'm going to take, I'm seeing a serious head shake in opposition. I'm sorry, I'm going to take my liberty here.
Mr. Chair, while you're doing that, I do want to note the written testimony we received from the Greektown Neighborhood Association, Brewers Hill Neighborhood Association, and Mr. Mario Maney. Yeah, so just
Oh,
want to
yeah.
make,
I
just want
can
to make sure
also
I thank
attest
them.
to a desire for support from Costas Grimaldis of the C. Grimaldis Gallery, who last week when I ran into him at the BMA, he said, you should send somebody to the rear of, what is it, the block of Charles Street that the C. Grimaldis Gallery is on. He said, it's just an open air, and I really thought he was gonna say drug market. He said, auto repair shop back there in the alley behind my gallery. You should really send somebody back there. I said, funny thing, we've got a bill coming up about just that next week. Okay, so what I see here is offenses to which this title applies, repairing, this is use of the road regulations, repairing vehicles on streets as a motor vehicle repair service on a public street or footway. First offense is $250, subsequent offense is $350. Again, that raises another kind of like practical enforcement question for me, is if I am going out there and I'm citing this person who another of my colleagues cited a day or two earlier, how do I know when I'm citing them that this is not the first time and that I should be writing this thing up at $350 instead of $250?
That's something I will have to get back to you on.
Okay. And then, was this, Councilman Parker, was this just kind of a drafting desire from DLR to have this next part in here on page 3 from 11 to 13? Was there already a general, violation of use of road regulations? I'm wondering why there's this all other violations, first offense, second offense, 25-100. Was there already a provision in the code that they were just kind of modifying? Hillary's nodding her head. Okay, great. So this was just a kind of a practical necessity that this was being put in here like this in order to retain something. Okay, I think I understand the bill and the intent. I also have these questions about the practical aspects of enforcement. I'd like to get some answers on them. Do we have a compelling reason we need to vote this today, or can we hold it and vote it? We have a hearing on the 20th, but we already have 7 bills scheduled for that, and I'm trying to plow through 6 of them, so I don't really want to hold it. Yeah. I don't want to take up a whole lot more time with a bunch of back and forth from DOT.
Perhaps DOT would have provided those answers to the committee's satisfaction when we get to second reader, and that would be an opportunity for us to check back in and make sure that we had heard from them on those matters.
I'd be okay with that. I just kind of don't want to move it all the way forward until we have some answers at least.
But, Mr. Chair, if I may, so are you all saying we will move it out today?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's the most appropriate way to go about this. There are conversations, I'm literally drafting an email right now to the director and the city administrator. There are conversations that need to be had here because, again, I want to make sure that what we pass out can be operationalized. I don't want us to have to do a back and forth on amendments, on second reader, on third reader. I think it's just prudent to pass out a clean bill once we know that we're passing something that the agency can implement.
I don't foresee anything in this bill needing to change. You mentioned rules and regulations. I don't see anything in this bill that would warrant the putting together rules and regulations or anything like that. I don't see anything about this bill which essentially just creates a definition of something that is prohibited and can be enforced by civil citation. I think the only questions here are about, shocking, DOT internal operational protocols and how they carry out that civil citation issuance. And again, I think the question, I don't know, I feel like Hillary gave us good answers from the code on like, essentially like if a person refuses to identify themselves to a special enforcement officer, the special enforcement officer says, look, you can give me your ID and I can write you this citation, or I can call a cop because you're not complying with me, and then you've got another problem on your hands. Like, I'm sorry, it's my job to enforce this code. But I think the only practical thing then that I'm recalling here is just this like, how do I know if it's the first or a subsequent offense that I would be writing as 250 versus 350 thing? And that's like.
But that's a major operation. That's what I'm saying.
I think that's
a
actually
major
quite
piece of the
minor.
bill. Yeah. What's your
Councilman Parker?
Sure. So I just by way of clarity, so we passed, if I recall correctly, we passed a similar issue of first, second. I mean, this is not the only thing that has first and second and third violations, right? It's kind of embedded in a bunch of places in the code. I'm just remembering this year in particular, relative to DOT, we did one around the RPP, right? That increased the penalties for second and third violations right now. Now that's within the system, the parking violation system, in which, you know, when you enter a VIN or license plate, presumably the TEO there on the street has access to that information, right?
I have questions about that.
Well,
also. Yeah.
sure. And so, you know, again, this would be within a different standpoint, but in putting in somebody's name or business's name that's being cited.
I'm Jimmy with an I, not Jimmy with a Y. I
Sure.
haven't been cited before.
And again, which is fine. And I think there's a way for that to work out. The 250 to 350, I feel like, is not nearly as critical as the being able to inform the person that the activity they're doing is prohibited, and that there's a citation associated with it. I think where the repeat thing comes out, more important, is where we have seen this happen over and over again, and so it's the same location, the same person, the same picture, and that's both the enforcement officer, but also the community who has been naming this as a challenge. And so I think it's less critical that like that it necessarily had to be accessible in a database so much as like when we're calling this in or asking for this enforcement, it's usually in the light of an extended challenge in a certain neighborhood. And so to be able to say, hey, listen, we were out here last week, right? And the community's called us out again. And so that's certainly the patrol officers on the BPD side will be very familiar with, I see them here every single day. And so like, we're working on that. So I think there's a narrative or relationship side to the particulars around enforcement with repeated offenses that's, I think, probably more important than the ability to look up in an instant whether this person, 3 months ago in a different neighborhood had done the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that given that there's reason, especially like with the RPP, to understand the practical means of tiered fines for subsequent offenses, and maybe if we look at some other things in the code that maybe have tiered fines like that, given that there's reason to interrogate for other ones, it doesn't seem unreasonable that we would just throw this in as something that we would interrogate with those things at a later date, and just get the law on the books now while we can. And so I guess for that reason, I'm okay with this, and I'm happy to take a vote on it if the committee wants. We got an amendment?
Mr. Chair, I would have moved Amendment 1 to Parker, Amendment 1 to, I guess 1 and 2 here to 25.
Yeah, we can do both together.
Both together, 250095.
I'll second that. All in favor of approving these two amendments? Councilman Parker, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. And no abstentions? Great. The committee likes the amendment. Shall we move the bill? We'll take a vote on the bill to make a recommendation favorable with this amendment to the full council. We'll do a roll call. The chair votes aye. I'm moving it, and I'm saying I vote aye. Roll call.
Mrs. Porter?
Aye.
Mr. Gray? Aye. Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Great. This bill with the amendment will be recommended favorable to the council at its next meeting on this coming Monday, November 10th. That's it for today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.